6 years into our marriage, my husband suddenly woke up. He shoved me off the bed, eyes filled with unasked disgust. Loretta Butler, my body was being controlled by a player before. He used my body to win you over, and that's the only reason I married you. Now his mission is over and he's gone, so I want a divorce. After that, he showered his first love, Victoria Cox, with affection and ground me into the dirt. He was intimate with Victoria right in front of me, made me hand wash her underwear. He even tossed a used condom onto my head, his voice dripping with contempt. I already told you the real Frederick is back. What are you trying to do? Summon that banished player to take over my body again? I shook my head, eyes brimming with anguish. I just can't believe it's true. Maybe you just lost your memory somehow. His lip curled in revulsion, and he had someone throw me out of the mansion. I stood outside the gates all night in the pouring rain until I collapsed. Through the haze, I heard Frederick's voice, talking to a friend. Aren't you afraid she'll find out the truth and leave you? I'd love to see how you plan to clean up that mess. I'm just making up for regret from my youth. You know how it is. The one that got away always keeps your heart racing. Once I've had my fun, I'll just tell her the player is back in my body and that I've already driven him out. Problem solved. Loretta loves me so much, she'll believe every word. A cold smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. So it was all a lie. Since you love playing the player game so much, Frederick, then this player should leave for good. The truth is, I really am a player. I only stayed because I fell in love with Frederick Harding. Now it was time to go. I called out to the system in my mind and told them my decision. A mechanical voice I hadn't heard in 6 years echoed through my head once more. Understood, host. I will arrange your departure in 1 week. Once confirmed, this choice is permanent. You will never return. Are you certain you wish to leave? Permanent departure meant I would never see Frederick again. The thought sent a dense, spreading ache through my chest. Then Frederick's voice drifted over again. Honestly, if Victoria hadn't gone abroad to chase her dreams back then, I never would have agreed to be with Loretta. I only did it to spite her. Truth is, whenever I missed Victoria so badly it drove me crazy, I'd pretend Loretta was her and take everything I wanted. And Loretta loved me so much she gave in to every demand, no matter how far I pushed. I even went too far once, and she lost the baby. She cried for weeks, blaming herself. But it was me. I'd switched her vitamins with birth control pills. She still has no idea I never wanted her to carry my child. My heart tore open all over again. So that miscarriage was because of him. And I'd spent all that time drowning in guilt, convinced it was my fault, putting myself through acupuncture and herbal treatments until my body was wrecked, all trying to get pregnant again. In the end, I was nothing but a joke. When I opened my eyes again, the only thing left in them was resolve. Confirmed. I'm leaving. Understood, host. The departure countdown begins now. In 1 week this body will be pronounced dead. You're awake, so get up and cook. Stop playing dead. Victoria's stomach is bothering her today. Make her some congee, cook it longer. So it's thick. Got it. Frederick walked over every inch of him, radiating authority, like I existed only to follow orders. When I did respond, he grabbed me and hauled me off the bed. My knees cracked against the marble floor, and the pain ripped a sharp breath from my lungs. Frederick seemed to realize he'd gone too far. Something uneasy flickered behind his eyes. If you want someone to blame, blame yourself for stealing Victoria Cox's place. You made her suffer for 6 years. This is your punishment. Everything you're doing right now is penance. You know that, right? Penance? If I hadn't overheard that conversation, I would have believed him. I would have carried the guilt, convinced he was right, that some stranger had hijacked his body and forced him into a life with me against his will. But now I knew the truth, and all I felt was how absurd it was. The fever had drained every ounce of strength from my body. I braced one hand against the wall and forced myself upright. Frederick, what exactly am I supposed to be atoning for? None of this had anything to do with me. I had a husband who loved me. Then one day I woke up and he told me everything before that wasn't really him, that someone else had been controlling his body. But what did I do wrong? I woke up and the man I loved was gone, and all that was left was your cruelty. He went rigid for a second. He hadn't expected me to push back. Not me, the woman who had taken every blow without a word. Guilt surfaced in his eyes, then vanished just as quickly, replaced by that familiar cold mask. How do I know you two weren't in? You two weren't in on it together? Putting on this innocent act to get my sympathy. Remember, Victoria wants dinner in 2 hours. Make sure it's ready. I looked at him, my face completely blank. I'm not making anything. The Frederick who loved me is gone, and you already pushed through the divorce. There's no reason for me to stay. I'm leaving, and after today, we never see each other again. It was true. The day after he'd told me that story, he had dragged me to sign the papers. Panic crossed his face for just a moment before he seized my wrist, his voice dripping with mockery. Is this some kind of game? Playing hard to get? I put you through hell, and you never left. Now you suddenly want to walk away? Nobody's buying that. I didn't respond. I started gathering a few pieces of clothing, the bare essentials. Then I spotted the bottle of vitamins I'd been taking every day. I picked it up and looked at him, my voice quiet and sharp. Frederick, are these really vitamins? He stiffened. Then, in a flash of anger, he knocked the bottle out of my hand. The person living with you before wasn't me. How would I know what's in there? I laughed bitterly to myself. Of course, he would never admit it, not now, but everything you have in this house came from me. I supported you for 6 years. If you really want to leave, cook one last meal, then you can go. Fine. I didn't stay to watch the shock settle across his face. I walked straight to the kitchen and started preparing dinner. In the living room, Frederick was watching a movie with Victoria. It was flipped. My favorite. The night Frederick came running through the rain to tell me he wanted to be with me, I'd been at home watching that exact film. That night, he wanted me like a man possessed. Later I found out Victoria had left that very same day, but I refused to think too hard about it. I told myself time would fix everything. I was still lost in the memory when Frederick walked over and slammed the kitchen's glass door shut. The cooking smell is drifting into the living room. Victoria feels sick. Don't open this door until the food is done. It was over 90 degrees outside. The kitchen had no air conditioning. The heat pressed in like a steam room, and with the fever still burning through me, the sealed air was suffocating. It's boiling in here. Can I at least crack the door open? Just a sliver so I can breathe. Frederick locked the glass door from the outside. Open a window if you're hot. Stop being dramatic. The air coming through the window was just more heat. By the time I finished cooking every dish, my head was swimming and my legs could barely hold me up. Victoria blinked her wide eyes and offered to help me carry the plates out. Then she picked up the kitchen knife and slashed it across her own wrist. Frederick came storming in and slapped me hard across the face. Loretta, all I asked you to do is cook a meal, and you slashed Victoria out of spite? Have you lost your mind? I stumbled back against the wall, shaking my head. I didn't cut her. She did it to herself. Frederick let out a cold laugh. Victoria's had low platelets since she was a kid. Her wounds don't heal easily. She'd have to be insane to risk her own life like that. I went rigid. I hadn't imagined Victoria would go that far just to frame me. The smell of smoke eventually drew the servants upstairs. By the time they pushed the bedroom door open, the fire had already died down to glowing embers inside the metal basin. One of the maids gasped. Mrs. Harding. I looked up calmly. Don't call me that anymore. The words stunned even me with how empty they sounded. The servants exchanged uneasy glances, but said nothing. Everyone in this house understood one thing very clearly. Frederick Harding adored Victoria Cox now. Protecting me was no longer worth the risk. I walked past them carrying a small suitcase. Nobody stopped me. Downstairs, laughter drifted from the second-floor guest room. Victoria's laughter. Frederick's lower voice followed after it, warm and indulgent in a way I hadn't heard in months. My chest still hurt, but strangely, it no longer felt unbearable. Outside, rain had started falling again. I stepped into it without opening an umbrella. The cold water soaked through my clothes almost instantly, cooling the burns on my hands. The system's voice sounded again. Host emotional attachment decreasing steadily. Current attachment, 92%. I asked quietly, when I leave, what happens to this body? This body will cease all biological function. Cause of death will appear natural. And after that, your consciousness will return to the central system space. I lowered my eyes. So that's it. Yes. No reincarnation. No second chance. No returning to this world. Just disappearance. For some reason, the thought made me feel lighter. Like a prisoner finally seeing the end of a sentence. I found a cheap hotel near the outskirts of the city and stayed there for the night. The room smelled faintly of dust and cigarettes. But it was quiet. No Frederick. No Victoria. No pretending. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally opened my phone. Hundreds of unread messages filled the screen. Most were old work notifications and missed calls from clients. 6 years ago, I had been one of the youngest investment directors in the city. After marrying Frederick, I'd gradually stepped away from everything to help support his career instead. At the very top sat one new message from an unfamiliar number. Mrs. Harding, I heard you resigned from the board years ago, but if you're interested, the company still has a position waiting for you. I stared at the text for a long time, then suddenly laughed softly. Mrs. Harding, even now. I typed back slowly. I am interested. The reply came almost instantly. Excellent. The acquisition meeting is in 3 days. Mr. Sutton personally requested your attendance. 3 days. I would still be alive in 3 days. After that, nothing. Maybe that was exactly why I suddenly wanted to go. Not for Frederick. Not for revenge. But because somewhere along the way, I'd abandoned every piece of myself for a man who had never truly loved me. The next morning, I was woken by furious pounding on the hotel door. I opened it to find Frederick standing outside. His face was dark with rage. Who gave you permission to leave? I stared at him quietly. He looked terrible. His shirt was wrinkled, like he hadn't slept all night. For some reason, that realization almost made me smile. Frederick pushed into the room without waiting for an answer. You vanished in the middle of the night. Victoria couldn't sleep because she felt guilty. I nearly laughed out loud. Then tell her not to feel guilty. His jaw tightened. Stop talking like that. Like what? Like, he stopped abruptly, eyes fixed on the burns covering my hands. For the first time since yesterday, genuine shock crossed his face. The blisters had worsened overnight, angry red patches spreading across my skin. You didn't treat them? I looked down indifferently. I forgot. Frederick's expression changed slightly. A strange panic flickered in his eyes. Because this was wrong. The old Loretta would have cried quietly from pain. She would have looked at him with red eyes and asked if he still loved her. But I was only standing there calmly, like none of it mattered anymore. He suddenly grabbed my wrist. We're going to the hospital. I pulled away immediately. Don't touch me. Frederick froze. That was the first time in 6 years I'd ever rejected his touch. Something unreadable flashed across his face. Then his voice turned cold again. Stop throwing tantrums. You're coming back with me. I'm not going back. His expression darkened completely. You think leaving the house for one night changes anything? Loretta, don't forget who you are. I met his eyes. No, I said softly. The one who forgot was you. Frederick's grip tightened around my wrist. You think you can just disappear whenever you want, he snapped. Have you lost your mind? I looked at him quietly. The hotel room was silent except for the rain tapping against the window. Then the system's voice rang out in my head again. Warning. Host body entering accelerated collapse phase. A sharp pain suddenly tore through my chest. My vision blurred for a second. Frederick immediately noticed. His expression shifted. Loretta? I steadied myself against the wall. The system had warned me the departure would look natural, but I hadn't expected it to start this early. Another wave of pain hit. This time blood rushed into my throat. A thin line of red spilled from the corner of my mouth. Frederick went completely still. Loretta? For the first time in months, there was actual fear in his voice. I wiped the blood away calmly. It's nothing. But the next second my knees gave out. Frederick caught me before I hit the floor. Loretta. His voice cracked. Actually cracked. I hadn't heard that tone since the day we'd lost the baby. He held me tightly against him, staring at the blood on my lips like he couldn't process what he was seeing. What the hell is happening to you? He demanded. The system's countdown echoed softly. Host life functions destabilizing. Remaining time, 3 hours. 3 hours. Shorter than I expected. Frederick was already pulling out his phone with shaking hands. Hospital. Right now. I grabbed his sleeve weakly. No. Don't be insane. Another cough ripped through me, harsher this time. Blood splattered across the front of his shirt. Frederick's face drained of all color. No, he whispered. His arms tightened around me frantically. No, no, no. I looked up at him slowly. For a moment, I saw the man I used to love. Not the cruel version. Not the liar. Just Frederick. Panicked. Terrified. Broken. Tears were already gathering in his eyes. Loretta, stop scaring me, he said hoarsely. We'll go to the hospital. Whatever this is, we'll fix it. Fix it? I almost smiled. There was nothing left to fix. The system spoke one final time. Host departure sequence beginning. Memory extraction complete. Thank you for your cooperation. Warmth slowly faded from my fingertips upward. Frederick must have noticed, because suddenly he looked horrified. No, his voice shook violently. Loretta, look at me. I did. His entire body was trembling now. Please, he whispered. Please don't do this. The desperation in his voice came too late. 6 years too late. I raised my hand slowly and touched his face one last time. His skin was warm. Mine already wasn't. Frederick, I said softly. He immediately grabbed my hand against his cheek like he was afraid I'd disappear. I'm here. I looked into his eyes for a long moment, then quietly asked the question that had lived inside me all this time. Did you ever love me at all? His expression shattered completely. Yes, he said instantly. Too instantly. Like he couldn't bear for me to leave believing otherwise. Tears finally spilled down his face. Yes. I loved you. I love you. Loretta, I swear I... A violent cough cut him off. Blood stained my lips again. His breathing became uneven. No, no, stay awake. I could barely hear him anymore. Everything felt distant. Light. Cold. But strangely peaceful. The pain in my chest was disappearing. So was the grief. So was the love. In the end, the last thing I saw was Frederick collapsing to his knees in front of me, clutching my body desperately against his chest, while sobbing my name like a man losing everything. And then, darkness. Complete system separation successful. Host consciousness returned. Farewell. Frederick Harding went insane slowly. At first, nobody noticed. Not the doctors trying to pull Loretta's body from his arms while he screamed at them to save her. Not the servants watching him lock himself inside their bedroom for 3 straight days. Not even Victoria. Because at the beginning, it just looked like grief. Then the funeral came. Frederick stood beside the coffin wearing the same blood-stained shirt from the hotel. He refused to change it. Refused to let anyone touch the coffin. Refused to let them close it. His eyes were bloodshot and hollow as he stared at Loretta's face like he was waiting for her to wake up and forgive him. But she never did. The moment that finally broke him completely came afterward. A lawyer arrived with a sealed package Loretta had prepared before her death. Inside was a stack of documents. Investment transfers. Property deeds. Bank records. Every single major asset Frederick owned had originally come from Loretta. His company? Founded with her money. His mansion? Bought under her credit. Even the business deals that made him famous had been negotiated by Loretta behind the scenes while he took the credit publicly. At the very bottom sat one final letter. Frederick's hands shook violently as he opened it. The handwriting was neat and familiar. Frederick, by the time you read this, I should already be gone. Actually, I wanted to leave much earlier. I stayed because I loved you. I stayed because every time you smiled at me, I convinced myself the man from before still existed somewhere inside you. But now I know the truth. There was never a player. You just stopped loving me. No. Maybe you never really did. I used to think losing you was the most painful thing in the world. But I was wrong. The most painful thing was losing myself while loving you. So this time, I'm choosing myself instead. Frederick. From now on, whether you're happy or miserable, it has nothing to do with me anymore." By the end of the letter, the paper was soaked through from his tears. That night, Frederick drank himself unconscious for the first time in his life. After that, everything spiraled. Victoria tried comforting him at first, but Frederick couldn't stand looking at her anymore, because now every time he saw her face, he remembered exactly what he'd traded Loretta for. One evening, Victoria wrapped her arms around him softly and whispered, "Frederick, she's gone now. You still have me." Frederick stared at her silently for several seconds, then suddenly exploded. "Get out." Victoria froze. His eyes were terrifying, red-rimmed, unstable. "Get out," he roared, smashing a glass against the wall hard enough to make her scream. "You wanted this, didn't you? You wanted her gone." Victoria burst into tears immediately. "I didn't." "Shut up." His voice cracked violently. "If it weren't for you." But the sentence stopped halfway, because deep down, Frederick knew the truth. The person who killed Loretta wasn't Victoria. It was him. After that night, he started seeing Loretta everywhere. In the kitchen, on the balcony, curled up asleep on the couch. Sometimes he'd wake up in the middle of the night convinced she was beside him, only to reach out and touch empty sheets. The mansion became unbearable. Every room held memories. Loretta laughing while cooking. Loretta asleep against his shoulder during movie nights. Loretta crying quietly after losing the baby while he pretended not to care. Eventually, Frederick stopped going to work, stopped shaving, stopped sleeping. People whispered that the great Frederick Harding had lost his mind. And maybe he had. Because one rainy night, a servant found him kneeling alone outside the mansion gates in the exact spot where Loretta had once collapsed waiting for him. He stayed there for hours in the pouring rain, begging someone who would never come back. Meanwhile, far away from that world, Loretta opened her eyes beneath warm sunlight. The system space had reconstructed her consciousness into a new life exactly as promised. No missions, no systems, no Frederick, just freedom. She sat up slowly inside a beautiful apartment overlooking the ocean. Healthy, alive, peaceful. For the first time in years, her chest didn't ache. A notification buzzed on her phone. Board meeting reminder, 9 a.m. Loretta smiled faintly. She'd accepted the position after all. 3 years later, her name became legendary in international finance circles. Cold-minded, brilliant, untouchable. Nobody knew about the life she'd left behind, and she preferred it that way. One evening after finishing a conference overseas, Loretta walked alone along the waterfront with a cup of coffee in hand. The wind tugged gently at her hair. Then someone called her name. "Loretta." She turned. A tall man stood a short distance away. Elegant suit, calm eyes, warm smile. Ethan Vale, the CEO. She'd worked alongside for nearly a year. He walked over and held out another coffee. "You forgot this." Loretta blinked, then laughed softly. "Looks like I did." Ethan studied her quietly for a moment before speaking again. "You know," he said carefully, "I've never met someone who looks lonelier while smiling." The old Loretta would have denied it immediately. But this Loretta just looked out at the ocean. After a while, she answered honestly, "Maybe I was waiting to become happy again." Ethan didn't press. He simply stood beside her silently while the waves rolled against the shore. And for the first time in a very long time, Loretta realized she finally was